This interview was recorded on February 11th, 2021 via Zoom. You are listening to Severin Sorensen, Executive Coach and Curator of the Arete Coach Podcast, where we explore excellence and the art and science of executive coaching. I'm speaking today with Executive Coach Katherine Crewe, ICD.D, professional engineer, FCAE, who is a TEC-Canada Chair and a board member of several companies, and an executive coach who operates from Greater Montreal, Canada. Katherine is insightful, sage, and perceptive, and came into coaching after a career as an executive in the biomedical device manufacturing industry. On Katherine's LinkedIn page, she posts the headline, "I accelerate the growth and development of Canadian business leaders. Checkmate your competition." That sounds like something most relevant today. As we begin the session, I want to share that Katherine is intelligent, curious-minded, and an active listener who is pushing the limits of what coaching can be, particularly in our stay-at-home virtual world. Katherine is also my first podcast guest from Canada, so I want to thank you for being here with us today. So I'm really excited for that. And somebody reached out and I said, well, I'm going to be interviewing Katherine. She goes, oh, she's the Queen Mother.
I know. He actually, it's Gilles Pre-Point, and he sent me a little note. He said, I hope you don't mind, but, I was talking to Soren, and I told him this, and oh my God, he called me the Queen of Montreal or something.
Oh,
now I've got something to live in, my shoes to live into.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was brilliant. And it was just a nice comment about somebody who's sage and present and outward facing and giving and all that. It was great. So I'm actually happy to have the Queen here with us today, and we'll have some fun with that as we move through our time. So I thought speaking with Katherine would be a great addition to the Arete Coach podcast that seeks to explore excellence in the art and science of executive coaching today. Welcome, Katherine.
Thank you very much. Pleased to be here.
Yeah, I've really raised the bar on you on this one. So let's see what we could do to have some fun.
Absolutely.
So to get us started, I understand you've been in the executive coaching field some 7 years. Can you tell me how your feet led you into this field?
It's a very interesting story. I was a bit of a crossroads, and I had a moment where I sat down and said, if this is really the last position or the last stint I have in my career, the next 10 or 15 years, what is it that I really want to do? And I decided it wasn't a repeat of what I'd been doing the first 35 years of my career. And I was very thoughtful and mindful and deliberate about looking at opportunities that challenged me differently, made me grow personally and professionally. And that's what led me to TEC-Canada and to be a chair.
Now, I understand that you're a professional engineer and that you've been in this biomedical space. Can you kind of tell me a little bit about what your career was before, just so we have some context? And also tell me, is there anything from your prior career that you bring to your coaching today?
Right. So my career up until that point, I was a biomedical engineer, I have a master's degree in biomedical engineering, and was in the biomedical life sciences space. So I worked for small companies, multinational companies, companies that were ready to go public, all sort of bits and pieces. And my engineering and my operations obviously was pivotal to that at the time. And what I find that I extracted from my engineering background was, one, the ability to think quickly and analyze and make decisions that were based on facts, and also to dig behind a little bit to make sure that we weren't only just looking at the emotional part of the equation, and that takes me forward. So I listen to my clients and the emotional piece, and then I start to dig underneath, because my engineering mind says, well, I need to understand the factual part of this equation. So that's where my engineering continues into my coaching practice.
Oh, that's great. Well, I can imagine the pointed questions you might ask with that factual background. We'll get into that a little bit later. Now, you are a TEC-Canada Chair. For some who are listening, they won't understand the difference between TEC and Vistage. Can you tell me what TEC-Canada is?
There is really no difference between TEC-Canada and Vistage. We are part of the same family. It's Vistage in the US. Vistage is franchised by country, and Canada happens to be its own franchise, and it still uses the old name TEC-Canada,
Okay.
the executive committee.
So how did you get attracted to TEC-Canada, and what has your journey been as a chair?
They actually found me. As I mentioned before, I was at a crossroads, and they actually reached out to me on LinkedIn. I had no idea what they were, who they were, and had no idea actually that I thought when they first contacted me that it was a volunteer activity to help mentor other business leaders. And it was only after we got through several layers of questions and interviews that I realized that this was actually possibly a paying position, that it could be a career change. Once I got more into it and met other people, I just got more and more excited about the opportunity to work with this organization.
That's great. So what does your coaching practice look like today?
So today I have in Vistage, there's 3 types of groups. There's CEO groups, key groups, and small business groups. Key is the key executive level. I have 2 CEO groups and a key group in the Montreal area.
Do your groups have a personality? Like, is there one group different from another?
I would say yes. The one CEO group is a legacy group. I was actually a transition chair, which means that the group had a chair. The chair started the group about 15 years ago and then got ill and couldn't continue as a chair. So I took over that group, and I have still some members in that group that have been in that group for 15 years. It's quite something. And then the second CEO group I started, they tend to be a little bit smaller businesses and a little bit younger. So there's a little bit of a different dynamic in the mean age of the 2 CEO groups, and the size of the businesses. So that's kind of the big difference between the 2 CEO groups.
Yeah, I asked that because I know that when I was chairing, you might start off with a group, but pretty soon you understand different personalities. I actually broke my group into 2 as I began to realize they had different personalities. And then kind of from that kind of spawned 2 groups, bringing people into each one. I had one group would be what we call like a regular group of, say, private industry CEOs. And the other one, it was kind of fascinating. I had several people that owned multiple companies. So I created the other group that you had to own 3 companies or you couldn't be in the group. And that was a fascinating group. So I had fun with all of them, but it was just so fun to have these different niches that you can kind of develop. Now, do you find that you are having people with the science and engineering background come to you, or is it really kind of, industry agnostic?
It is pretty industry agnostic, although I do have some manufacturing and some engineers who are running non-manufacturing businesses. And I guess maybe there's an affinity on the coaching level and the one-to-ones more than maybe otherwise. But I wouldn't say there's an overabundance of engineers or manufacturing in either group, really.
That's one of the points I think is really important. Sometimes in coaching, we think we have to have either been in their shoes or be in their industry to do it. But sometimes we can be a better coach if we can ask great questions and not have the stumbling block that we think we know something about their industry.
Yes, I would agree. In fact, I even see that within the group context when they share their issues and they've been in industry groups only before they've been into the tech and Vistage environment. And I find that when they start to hear how other industries are doing it, their minds seem to open to a whole wide range of new possibilities that they had pretty much before that not assumed they could do, just because their industry had sort of given them the lanes that they thought they had to stay in. So I definitely see the advantage of the multi-industry facet of that.
Earlier, you said that you were thinking, what I'm going to spend my next 10 years doing. And you kind of had this contemplative time where you thought about coaching. Can you tell me about your decision to choose coaching? And then once you decided, what did you do to intentionally become a great coach?
It's interesting. I have a real funny relationship with the word coach, to be quite honest with you. And when 7 or 8 years ago, Vistage and TEC, they were looking for, and when they were trying to find and recruit chairs, it was all about, had you been an industry leader and did you have P&L responsibilities? And they really weren't looking for coaching specific backgrounds. I think that is kind of flipped a bit now, and I see how they recruit new people. They tend to look more for people who have coaching or coaching designations. So I didn't come into this thinking I was going to be coaching anybody. I was here to elevate their game. I was here to ask them tough questions, which is where you get to the coaching. I understand the business. I understand making the business decisions. And I was looking more to hold them accountable than what I would say you hear more about in the traditional coaching. So I've had a funny relationship with the word coach. People say that you Katherine, you're coaching. And I'm going, well, I guess if you say so, but that's not something, that wasn't how I put out my shingle to start with. That was for sure.
Well, certainly the definitions have kind of moved around over time. There's more definition of swim lanes today, but what we're really doing is helping people who are running businesses to achieve hopefully extraordinary lives and growth. Now, looking at your background, so you've been in this some 7 years. What is a lesson you've learned recently that you wish you'd have had right on day one when you were starting?
To follow my own path. When you get into this, Vistage and tech, they offer you all kinds of training. I would say it's not really coaching, but training. And this is how you run a meeting. This is how you interview and make a selection of a member in your group. And so you start to think, well, I have to follow this prescription. I have to follow this script. I have to follow this process. And I think it takes a few years to sort of pick little bits out of each one of those trainings to say, okay, this fits with me. I'm going to take that and use that. But the rest of that, I'm going to park because it didn't really help me. So the closer I got to my authentic self and used the bits and pieces that were that resonated with me, the faster it worked. So I guess, if I wish I knew that earlier on, it wouldn't have taken quite so long to get to the authentic person in the middle.
I noticed that you are doing some board advisory work, and in fact, one of your certifications is the ICD.D. Can you tell us a little bit about that work?
Sure. So in Canada, there's an Institute of Corporate Directors, and they run a fairly intensive program with the certification and exam, everything at the end, that basically tells companies and boards that you have been through fairly rigorous training to be competent as a board member. I did that at the time because I was on a public board, and I felt being on a public board, I should really understand all my responsibilities and live up to what the shareholders would expect of someone on a board. But it has also given me a good insight into governance and all kinds of other things, which has been helpful in other parts of my life and business.
In your life, do you have a why or something that gives you energy, drive, or purpose?
I do. And it took a long time to work that out. And it really comes down to, quite frankly, I like to surround myself with really interesting and extraordinary people. And I find that if I just stick to that, amazing things happen. First of all, I meet amazing people. I hear amazing stories. And I'm just, that much more enriched by the community by hearing that and being part of that.
I'm curious, in running your groups, do you do any retreats with them? Is that an important part of your process?
It's interesting you asked. The group I took over never had retreats. And so, after I was all full of piss and vinegar from my Vistage training, and I said, what? You don't have a retreat? And they went, no, we don't want to. What? First of all, what's a retreat? Because they'd never been exposed to that with the prior chair. And so I shared with them what it was, whatever. And they just decided that they didn't want to do that. So I didn't really start my second group until 2019. And I didn't really have a retreat as part of my practice. So I didn't even, I think I asked the new group as well. And, they're younger and they have families. And I just find the key group as well, it's just it didn't work out, being away for the weekend or whatever. So I don't really have retreats as a part of my practice.
Culturally, you'll find groups that want to meet and don't. I can recall having, especially if you start without the practice of going on a retreat, it sometimes can be really hard to bring one in. They're like, look, I didn't sign up for that. I'm with my family on weekends. I'm with wherever. And so it's really interesting in terms of thinking how to do it. Why I bring it up is it tends to be a very sticky way of helping people bond, make connections, and stay longer. I'm always interested in terms of the metrics of coaching. When I go back and I look, if you look at the industry, typical coaching lasts from one session to a couple of sessions, but typically say 6 months for a series. But people fall off. It's like, okay, I achieved what I wanted to achieve. When you add a peer group like you have, then they stay a little bit longer. But I've had people say, oh, I think I've learned enough, and so I'm going to leave. I go, why are you leaving? It's rich every time we're learning things. And then I learned from Mickey Williams, a great chair we had on an earlier podcast. She told me at a conference, you got to get them to retreat together to build the relationships. And when they do, they stay and they build these rich relationships, and they start doing more and more with each other, even outside of the group, because of these great friendships that they make. So I bring it up there, and I was just kind of curious, but culturally, I had one group when I announced it, they're like, no way. I will not go. And I'm like, okay, all right. It wasn't a group norm when we started, but when I start my next group, we'll create it as a norm.
I have a feeling that even my group that was my legacy group after COVID, they miss each other. I mean, it'll be nice in Canada. I mean, here, I haven't had any meeting in person since last February. I mean, it'll be a year now for me. We didn't have an opportunity to do hybrid. So we've just been virtual for a year. And I think I would bet if I brought it up, if we can meet this summer at at some sort of resort and be outside, I have a feeling that they will do it this year.
They would all go. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Another one, I don't know if you've tried this. So I was in a peer group, coached at a Vistas group long before I was chairing or something else. And I learned something from my chair at that time. He used to run an alumni day for the group every year. I'd never heard of such a thing, but it was so fascinating. We would do it at a golf club or someplace, but there were all these former members who would come, and you start realizing the richness of the group. And guess what? Former members frequently become members again.
Yes, and I have an example of that. I ran one of those, in fact, very early after I'd taken over the group because of the other chair had retired. So I just want to introduce myself to alumni, depending on why they had left before. I did end up with a member that was an alumni and had been out of it for 5 or 6 years, come back to the group. So you're right. Yeah.
No, that's good strategy. So if I asked you now with 7 years experience in this, what was your best day ever as a coach? What comes to mind?
It's interesting you should ask that question. It was one of those days where I had a one-to-one, and it was a good one-to-one, but it wasn't, we went around circles in some of the questions, and I didn't really think I'd got deep enough or, got underneath where he was giving me sort of the Teflon answers. And I thought, I really didn't challenge him enough. I should have pushed harder. Anyway, so I hung up the phone, whatever. And to my delight or surprise, I get an email from him the next day going, that was the best one-to-one. You gave me so much to think about. I had to change the way I show up. And I was like, whoa, like I never would have said that was not my take on how that meeting ended. So even though I didn't think I pushed far enough, I obviously pushed him out of his comfort zone more than I thought. So it's one of those ones where you don't think you did a very good job, and then you turn out you've made a huge impact on their lives. So I thought that was pretty neat that day.
I can't tell you the number of times when coaching where there's an issue that comes up, or there's an elephant in the room that is being avoided. And as a coach, as a chair, as a professional trying to help them, can I have permission to go into this issue? And, they're like, I don't know if I'm ready. I go, well, you could, here's your safety word. You call your safety word. But I think this would help with your permission. Let's go in and you ask that hard question and let them sit with it. And it's like you say, you don't know how it will echo in their minds. I recently was talking to somebody who is a dear friend. I've coached over, started and stopped coaching over a number of years. And a recent conversation, they said, you have no idea the words you have said that have echoed in my mind and caused me to change. And I have taken deliberate action. And I'm like, wow, I need to really be careful what I say. And because sometimes it can really fall hard. But
Yeah.
to get this great movement, like your best day, that's awesome. To have somebody take action, be deliberative, move from place to place, I think is wonderful.
I actually asked my group in the last meeting, some of the other chairs are starting to do 2-to-1s and 3-to-1s and not just the 1-to-1. So I asked them in a poll, which would allow them to be a little bit autonomous, like, I didn't know who it was. And over 70% of them came back and said they didn't want to do 2-to-1s, that they liked the time alone more than they wanted to share with one of the other people in the group, which kind of, I don't know, I didn't think it was going to be like that. So I think you're right. I mean, they like that space. They look forward to that 1-to-1, and they didn't want to share their time with me with anybody else. So.
Well, think about the time it takes. I had one person I was coaching, and he said to me, he goes, I'm an incredibly introverted person. It is all I can do to come to a peer group meeting and to talk. He goes, I'm writing all sorts of notes. He goes, I may never ask a question, but this is the only place that I can go. He said, but I know I need to be here. And you start developing those relationships with people. And it's exciting because, it's not hard for an extroverted person to ask. It's the challenge is how can you keep them, contributing their best, but not smothering the group. But right. It's the others that is so interesting. Do you have any strategies to bring out of people their best so they can contribute so everyone has a voice in the group?
You're right. I mean, there's a couple that are very thoughtful and they need time to process. You can't go to them in the meeting too early because they haven't processed it all yet. I found that those ones that are really thoughtful, that are massively writing their notes, I usually leave them towards the end. And then I will deliberately call them out and say, Jody, you haven't contributed very much today. Please share what your thoughts were. And, it's rich when it finally comes out. So that's how I usually try and specifically call on them. And even on Zoom, do the same thing, whether it's in the room or on the Zoom, you call them out at the end of the meeting and let them share their thoughts.
Well, we're on Zoom for a minute. What are you finding helps keep people engaged on Zoom? What are you doing in your group and coaching work?
I am finding really that the breakout rooms are a godsend. They are in and out of the breakout rooms all the time. I mix them up. They're probably in and out of a breakout room every 20 minutes to half an hour on a different question or topic. I don't like it because I can only bounce into the rooms a little bit and I don't get the richness of what's going on in the room as much as if I broke them into the corners of the room and I could follow the conversations better. So I don't like it as much, but definitely they like it. So that's really what I do now. Breakout
rooms with a great question and mixing up the people and the energy is a wonderful strategy to keep it all there in the group. That's great. Can I ask you about questions? Questions are one of the core tools of a coach. What are some of the most powerful questions you've asked as a coach that have made a difference in the lives of people you're working with?
I don't really have a go-to question.
If you had one, what would it be?
I guess it would be why have you decided, or why have you concluded the outcome based on what you've just told me? Like what led you to decide that was happening based on the story you've just told me? I hear a set of circumstances or a set of facts and I draw one conclusion and they're drawing a different conclusion. So when I see the conclusion they've drawn and I've drawn a different one, I would say, well, why have you concluded that when I'm looking at the same set of pieces of information and I haven't concluded something different? And that usually makes them stop and question their own sort of sanity on that point and figure out what else is there.
So how would one go deeper from that moment? So now you have a different narrative. and you have somebody, what's your next stage after asking that question?
Well, I would see how they responded. And then I would say, well, this is what I heard. This is my conclusion on what you just said. This is how I heard it. And this is what I thought. And then usually they go, oh, you would see that, you would conclude that from what I just said. And I went, yeah. And I said, maybe the person that you're dealing with is concluding the same thing. Is that the message you want them to have, or is that the conclusion you want, to have on this situation? And then they go, oh, no. And then, yeah, well, what do you really want to have happen then?
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So are there any other tools that you use?
I try and listen. I mean, it's really hard to be an active listener. I would say that's one of the very, when you start off, you want to be helpful. And so when people are telling you things, the first thing that you become a consultant as opposed to the coach. And so your mind is constantly like, how can I fix this? How can I fix this? And I would say probably one of the things, the breaks you've put on over the years is, okay, when that starts to happen, it's like, okay, you're not listening. You're just trying to think out what the solution is. Stop and listen to what they're saying. So I would say that's probably really trying to listen. Now that I know them a bit better, it's a bit easier to do that, because now you've got all the other context you can put together with what they're saying. But it's really, stop the consulting voice and just go to the listening mode.
Do you have any hacks that help you or reminders to help you stay present?
Sometimes I write things down. I start to write down what they're saying, because then if I do that, I can't go ahead and I can't be thinking, the consulting voice can't go on, because I'm writing down.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Writing down can be really helpful. Has there been an issue in your coaching that you won't deal with?
I don't get into, when I realize that they need professional help, I guess I don't profess to get into any of that. So if it's, if you need a marital intervention or mental health intervention or something beyond what I would say is just, when it gets too serious like that, then I just say you need to go get professional help here. I'm not.
Right. You bring up a great point here. And if we were to put a coaching minute on this video, I would say, as a coach, your swim lanes, your boundaries, when, oh, I've just heard something that's a reportable issue. Oh, I just heard something. This person could really use this person, or it's out of my wheelhouse. I can't tell you how many times I say, I'm not an accountant and I'm not a lawyer, and I can refer you to them. So there's so many situations. So as a coach, I think what is really helpful is to build your own book of trusted referrals.
Yes.
Not just referrals, but ones where you've gone out and you've vetted. Like, for example, from time to time, an entrepreneur will say, I need a wealth advisor. Okay, I have a list of trusted, vetted wealth advisors I can give you. But guess how they made it on the list? Long before I ever gave them to as a referral, I got on the phone or I got in session with an advisor and I said, I'd like to ask your advice as though I were a client with this issue. And I will give them a scenario that I've already worked out the answer to with other advisors. If I have a check for X, what is the most tax efficient way for me to apply that as an owner of company X? And oh boy, gosh, the answers go from all over. But when I start to hear wisdom, I'm like, okay, you're great. I think you can help the people I'm working with. I'll write their name down. They then become a referral source. Same thing, accounting, tax, legal, structure, even therapists. We don't do therapy and coaching, but I refer people all the time to a licensed clinical social worker or to someone else who can help them. But I need to know that they have the mindset to work with individuals. So having that list, I think, can be really helpful. In your markets, you're in Canada, what's the best way for coaches in Canada to find referral sources like that? What might you've done?
Yeah, that's interesting that you've taken it the next step. I mean, I do like to connect people. And sometimes, I mean, it's not as serious, as a social worker, but even connection, someone who was trying to get better with their Teams environment on Microsoft and just finding, people who consulted and did work to help companies on Microsoft implementations or whatever. So I keep, when I meet people, when I say I like to surround myself with interesting people, that's what I'm looking for. What do you do? Maybe one day I'm going to meet someone who's going to really need your services, or vice versa. And I do a lot of connections. You should meet them. I've heard whatever. So I do that too. But I like your idea of actually taking it the next step and digging a little deeper, because you are referring them. I often give them the caveat when I introduce them, saying, I don't know if you guys are going to work out. I don't know if, they're the right person to help or whatever, but this is a person I know is in this space. If it doesn't work out, don't worry about it, kind of thing. But I think what you've just described in vetting them one more layer down, I think I will adopt myself. So that's.
I think it's really important. It's been important in my practice. So as part of the coaching, I'm getting to the end of the coaching conversation. It's like, all right, we've done all this stuff. How can I help you? How can I serve you? Can I give you a referral to something? What can I do to add increased value? And of course, they get into a habit. Okay, just like you said, I'm doing a new ERP. I need a solution person. I might want to develop an app. And I'm like, okay, I don't know the answer today, but I'll gift you a referral. Or, oh, I have the right person for you. Here's the person. But those trusted advisors that you create can be so rich in terms of increasing your expertise and guidance for them, because you're not doing the work. You're merely curating trusted people. Why do people go to Amazon and look at all the stars that are there? And read reviews, because they're hoping somebody has been thoughtful and curate something for them. And I think we do our clients great service helping them along the way.
Mm-hmm. Excellent suggestion.
The community, the chair community, your community of peers, we're part of a community and so on. Tell me how important it is as a coach to have a community, and how do you value your community?
Yeah, that was probably the best part of this whole tech vistage thing when I went to my first chair world. And my last job was with a fairly large multinational organization, and they're not without their politics. And when I came into this community, and everybody full stop was giving and caring and only wanted to do the best thing by me, I went, oh my God, like, have I died? Like, does this workplace actually exist? And it's never been different. Every chair, 7, we didn't go this year, but 6, 7 chair worlds. I have never met a chair, regardless of from what country. I don't know, what DNA test we should all be taking to be part of this, but I just find chairs are very unique animals. And as I say, I've never met one I didn't like and wasn't completely wonderful and supportive of me. So.
I agree. I've had a rich time in my years going there. I loved all the sidebar conversations as well. And they used to have something they called Ideaville. Mm-hmm. And I can remember just signing a one right after the other, just little 3 to 5 minute kind of TED.com, quick little, here's the hit. If you can use it, great. Next up. And I'd come away 7, 8 pages of notes of just things. Wow, this is just rich. So peers are so important. So if people don't have a peer group of their own coaches, I encourage you to get one and get in the best one you could find. If you get in, it's not the right fit, get into another one, but really surround yourself by great people. Now, we've talked a bunch about success is your best day. Can you tell me about a hard day? Can you tell me about a challenge or a failure you might have had in coaching and what you've learned from it?
Yeah, I had one recently where I had a member. In Quebec, we've got language issues. There's French and English, and I run English groups. I'm the only English groups in Quebec. All my other chairs run either bilingual or French groups. And I sometimes get Francophones come to my group on purpose because they have business outside of Quebec and they want to practice their business English. And I had one member who thought maybe she would be better off in a French group. And she just phoned up, but very abruptly, and just said, Katherine, you have to move me to a French group. And I didn't stop. I didn't challenge her. And after I said, yeah, I'll refer you to one of my colleagues, I just felt that I hadn't served her well. I hadn't challenged her. I felt like I had just given, like, she's used to getting her way, and I was just one more person in her life that didn't give her a hard time, which is not what my role is as her chair. So I really felt that I was going to go to chair hell for that one, because I really had not served her well.
Chair hell. Okay.
Chair hell. I was on a fast track to chair hell on that one.
Well, tell me about, you brought up something, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so let me just repeat what I heard you say. You said, I didn't serve her well as her chair. And I don't know if you said I went along with what she did or I didn't challenge her. Can you speak more about that? What is the role of a chair or a coach?
Yeah, I think everybody else in their lives probably backs down. I mean, they own the company or they're the CEO. And even if in their heart they might want to push back or, say no or whatever, they don't, purely based on the authority relationship. And the relationship with the chair is supposed to be different than that. And the group is supposed to be different than that. I mean, the group is supposed to catch you on your blind side, and warn you that you're off, whatever. And I've seen that happen, and I've seen the power in that. And so I guess I just felt that, and that's part of TEC. I mean, to me, that's really the richness of the peer group. You're in a place where there is no judgment, but you're among peers, and no one's going to let you fall off the cliff either. And I just felt that I hadn't personally, as the chair, not served her, and I hadn't allowed the group to serve her, because the group didn't weigh in and fix it either. So I didn't like the way the whole thing went down at all.
Well, I've been there as well. I've had some rough ones. How did that rascal get in our group? You're supposed to protect us, all those different things. So what do you look for in your ideal member? What are the attributes you're looking for?
Yeah, I'm looking for someone who is really there to find this safe. I mean, I really say it's a safe place. It's a safe place like no other, where there is no discrimination or you're not put in a box. No one's expecting anything of you. You've got a safe place to be, who you are, and let your hair down. And one of my alumni members used to say, when he was explaining to other people what it was like to be in a TEC group, he says, you get naked, there's no place to hide. You're all exposed. All your secrets are exposed. And I think I look for people that can, first of all, manage that, because it's not comfortable sometimes, and also add value to that. So be able to ask each other hard questions and be part of those conversations.
Why do you think your groups stay together?
My role, or my chair vision, is that they get a day, and same with the one-to-one. They get a day and an exposure like they can't get anywhere else. It's not going to a keynote speaker. It's not going to a conference. This is an environment like it's so hard to explain what it is until you've been in it, but you cannot get this anywhere else. And if the day ends and that's what you've got something that you couldn't get anywhere else, and an experience that you couldn't have gotten any other way, then we've had a good day, good meeting.
I agree. That would be a great day. So how have your coaching methods and techniques changed over time, or have they?
Well, I care less about, what you think of me. I guess I've been a bit bolder in pushing the buttons. And of course now I've got some 7-year relationships with some of the people in the legacy group. And so, you're a little bit more familiar, and you can maybe push the boundaries a little bit more. So I guess maybe that's how I've become less timid about asking hard questions and pushing harder.
I'm going to move to kind of future talk here. So COVID happened. It's impacted markets. Can't meet together. We've been meeting online and Teams or Zoom or whatever format we do. What have you learned during this process that you want to keep when we start going back to regular meetings, meeting with people?
I have learned a lot about myself, actually. I have done the 12 questions with Jim Collins before. And when we did the Stockdale question, I talked about it and explained it, but didn't really get it until now. And so for the Stockdale paradox, he explains that the people in the POW camp, the ones who said, I'll be home by Christmas, I'll be home by Easter, didn't fare as well as the ones who had a very different mindset about I'm going to live the best day, one day at a time. At least that's sort of my synthesis of the Stockdale thing. And I think I was caught in that. I was fully convinced last March that we would be done by the summer, that come the fall, we would be back in person. COVID would be gone because it was a virus, and summer months would get rid of it. It would be like SARS or MARS or all the rest of it, very short. And so I didn't really mentally prepare myself for long-term virtual meetings, what I had to show up like in the virtual meetings, what my energy had to be in the virtual meetings. Like I said, running them in all the breakout rooms and just changing the entire structure of that probably took me too long to implement because I was always in this temporary mode. This is only temporary, and it will be back to the way it was. And I've come to the conclusion now it will never be back to the way it was. And in fact, have embraced the notion that I will likely have hybrid meetings forever from now on. And that whether or not it's COVID related, it could be travel related. I've got lots of members in my group who have properties in Florida, or a snow day because we're in Quebec, that I need to be prepared for a virtual multiple hybrid kind of, or my speaker, doesn't get on his airplane, but we can still run the meeting because he's in his own city, that I have to be prepared for that hybrid world probably forever. So I better embrace the technology and how to run meetings differently. And I guess that's what I want to take after COVID.
So interesting when we think about how this has impacted us, and it just is. It's kind of like the shit happened. COVID happened. And, kind of what do we learn from it? I'll tell you from my practice, it definitely put a tailspin in my practice on certain areas that I had to learn. Like I was doing a lot of public speaking in the first 6 weeks of last year. I traveled enough miles to get 2 medallion levels on Delta. I mean, I was everywhere. And then suddenly it shut off. And now I was actually on my way to Ohio. And they're like, stop, shut down the state, turn around, we're going to do this virtual. Okay, what does that mean? And to try to figure out how to do it. And I can remember some really bad presentations I gave. Really painful. Painful for me. Must have been much worse for all the people listening. And then over time getting it such that now actually I think it's a blessing. Like next week, so I'm giving presentations on several days, morning and afternoons, 2 different groups where I literally can virtually go. And guess what? I'm home with family all the time. I'm loving it. So I'm like, all right, this part I really like, but it took me a while to figure out how to do that. I'll tell you something that's still taking me a while. I can get on a chairlift and meet with somebody. Like this happened recently. I was skiing in Park City a week ago, and we were socially distanced. If you're single skiing, you're at one side of the chair, another one. So there was another person, and a lot of business owners happen to go to Park City. And so I'm like, well, what do you do? Well, I'm a business owner. What do you do? I'm an executive coach. We start talking. Before we got off to the top of the chairlift, the person said, I want to talk to you. I need a coach. Now that was an in-person reaction where 2 people get to meet and so on. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've done that. I probably should just stay skiing the whole time and pick singles going up the lift. But my point is, how did that conversation happen? How were you able to have a conversation and get a customer so quickly when through all the LinkedIn and all the other things, it's just hard. How do you make space? How do you create that? And I have to admit, I'm trying a lot of things and some of it is working, but nothing is working as good as the old methods. That tells me, even though I want the crisis to end, I don't want the crisis to end until I figure this out. Because if I can figure out how to have full online groups and full coaching that's geography-less, I'm in a better shape. So I'm still trying to scratch it. We're making some progress, but wow, what learning and what forced learning. Never would try this if we didn't have to.
Yeah, and the technology, I'm flabbergasted. I mean, I'm not an, I'm still a baby boomer, so my kids still, think I'm an idiot when it comes to technology. But I am blown away about the technology. The companies I haven't even heard of, the products. Every time new products, I'm like, oh my God, like there is just an explosion of tools in this space. Yes. It's crazy.
Well, and it's crazy making. So we have to kind of figure it out. I'm reminded, one of my favorite quotes on change during crisis is from Horace. It comes out of the 1st century. He said this: adversity has the effect of eliciting talents, which in prosperous circumstances would have lain dormant.
It was interesting that Horace quote at the beginning of COVID. One of the slogans in our group was, there are no B's in, like, you A, B, and C, when you sort of pigeonhole your employees. There are no B's anymore. They either rose to be A's or they failed to be C's, in their organizations when it first hit a year ago. And that was kind of the buzz in the group all the time. Yep, no more B's. They either were A's or we got rid of them. Now they're C's, and if we have to do layoffs, we know exactly who's going to fall off the table. So it's kind of interesting that it falls.
Yeah. Well, and some of those A's, the A might stand for agility, the ability to adapt and to pivot, do whatever's necessary to bring value, versus I'm stuck in a moment and I can't get out of my way. If you're stuck, you can't help me in the future. I think that's where we are. We're at this time right now where we've got to face it. You're underwater. You've got to make it to the surface. You must breathe, or life like you know it won't be the same. And so we're really working through some of those struggles and opportunities. So as we talk about this, can you think about a single attribute that you have that has made you a difference maker in coaching today?
The feedback I get is that accountability is a big value of mine. I guess I always felt in my corporate life that you could count on my word. And so if I told you I was going to do something, you really never have to follow up with me. You knew that if I said I was going to do something for you by Friday, it would be done by Friday. And I think that's really important. And so I hold my members and my non-tech and Vistage clients accountable. And I don't know if anybody in their lives holds them nearly as accountable as I do. So I would say probably that trait in me. And it's funny, even at the end of the year when I sort of ask for feedback, and I think I'm over the top. I think, well, boy, I'm probably pressing some buttons here. The feedback I get from my members is, you can hold me more, don't let up and do more. And I'm thinking, really? Oh my God. So.
That funny? Yep. I had a client one time. I got a chance to visit his house, and he had this extraordinary gym in the basement, and he would hire a professional trainer to come in and coach him. It happened that on that day, as we're walking through, I go, "Oh, what a great facility." He goes, "Oh yeah, fired my trainer today." Oh, okay. I'm thinking learning experience. I said, "Tell me more about the firing. Tell me what the situation was." "Oh, I just don't think he was challenging me enough. He just wasn't giving it. And since I wasn't getting enough, I decided to try someone else. I really want somebody coming out after me in the workout." I'm like, all right, memo to me. I'm coming at you, or I'll be a short-termer as well.
That's right.
So it's kind of an interesting life learning. So many times our clients will tell us what we need to know about them and how they treat other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So Clayton Christensen had a book, very powerful one, with a title, "How Will You Measure Your Life?" How will you measure your life?
My mother always taught us, leave it better than you found it. Now, in the context of that, it was more cleaning up the kitchen after you made a mess, but it sort of applies, beyond that context. And I guess that's kind of what I come back to. I mean, have I left my members better than I found them? Have I left their companies better than I found them? have I left me better than I started at the beginning of all of this? And so it's about, if it's all better because of some of my interactions, then that's a good legacy.
Well, think of it as the kitchen of the business.
Yes.
It's where all the work happens. That's awesome. So if you were going to give advice to new people thinking about coming into a coaching career, what would that advice be?
My advice would be, you have a lot to offer, more than you probably imagine, and not to be afraid that you are worth the effort, and that people will value you and what you have to say and what you bring, and not to be afraid to be your authentic self, and that it will be enough.
That's important. Not to be afraid, and that we are enough. The answers are right there inside you. Let's just unlock that.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. What's the question I've not asked you that would tell us more about you?
I don't know. You've asked me a lot of questions, Soren.
Well, if you had that question, do you want me to nominate a question for you?
Yeah, I guess.
So the question I would have for you is, think back at your first day as a coach. What were you feeling then? And talk to yourself now with the advice you have now to a new coach that's just starting off, knowing what you know now, to give advice to those early few steps.
Sure. My first meeting, it was the transition group. And, this happened really quickly. The chair that was there before got ill fairly quickly. So, they made the decision, and I went to boot camp like within 2 weeks. And then I was all of a sudden chairing this first meeting. And coming out of boot camp, I thought, oh my God, this group's been together for 7 or 8 years. They're going to be like armed and dangerous. I'm going to come in here and they're going to just like eat me alive. And that was not the case. I put up the posters and they went, oh, issue processing. What's that? And I was like, oh my God, what have I stepped into? So, I guess my advice would have been, looking back now, is don't make assumptions about what is really going on there, or what they know or what they don't know, and what they're ready for, because quite frankly, they turned out to be nothing like I was expecting.
Yeah. Well, not making assumptions. You also find that every group has their own norms, and a new chair coming in, a new coach, a new member, it's time to reform the norms, either stipulate what they are, or I can remember having on an annual basis a norming section where, all right, I think we're getting away from what our roots were. It's time to express who we are, who we want to be, and how we show up here to get high value.
I did that at the beginning of COVID, because our norms were based on the in-person, and someone said, what happens if I'm going to be late? And we started to, you know what, let's do it again. So we did it on purpose for the virtual meetings, and set up a new virtual meeting kind of set of norms that are a little bit different than the in-person ones. But
can you think of anything that would be different about an in-person norm versus a virtual norm?
Well, part of it was this, arrive early and the breakfast and the social and that piece. So the way we did that was we open up the Zoom meeting, a half an hour early. And if you want to show up in that half an hour, it's open mic time. Also about, it's a bit easier to arrive late in a Zoom meeting than it is when you're, walking in the back of the room when someone's in the middle of speaking. So we kind of talked a little bit about that. Cameras on, cameras off. We would break every hour and make sure that we stood up and move around. Not that you shouldn't be doing that in person, but particularly on Zoom. So it was just little things like that were just a little nuance on the virtual piece.
Oh, that's exciting. Well, I want to thank you for your time today. It's been a fast hour and very rich. I remember coming up and visiting you and one of your groups a few years back, and it was just fun. You've got such a great city, and you have a great group, and so it's very neat. Let me tell you a couple of things I heard while we were going through this. you have this theme about accountability, and it may come from your engineering, but you are definitely a quant person. You love the data, you love the facts and so on. And that really came out. So I think that's very exciting. I love how you shared in your story, you followed your own path. You reached a point you're like, look, who am I today? But is this who I want to be as I go? And you made a deliberate intention. I think I'm going to lead into this thing called chairing, something today we would call coaching. You have your own definition of coaching. Is coaching mentoring? Is it coaching and kind of this expectation, this coaching more sports related, and some dialogue there? You asked a question, why have you decided to do that or conclude that based on the story you told me? Just going in deeper, checking assumptions, understanding it. I thought that was very powerful. You talked a lot about active listening, the value of doing that. Oh, you had a great coach strategy. In order to quiet the mind, write down what they're saying in the interview, and that can help. You're not doing multiple activities at one time, keeping you present, writing down things. I thought that was a great little hack. You talked about in your groups, you try to create this safe place, no discrimination. Very interesting. I'm wondering if you meet in rooms with screens that come down, you say you like to go where you can get naked. So I'll assume it's proverbially naked. Yeah. But the thought, though, is that we're all in, we all see it, warts and all, what's going on, so that we can help each other. You shared some of your experience in COVID. You talked about Jim Collins, the Stockdale paradox. You walked through a variety of different things, and you gave lots of advice on what you're doing to make meetings active and interesting and engaged. You're doing breakouts, as you said, multiple times an hour, just getting people engaged. Thought that was interesting, as well as this whole notion of how do you do what you do? How do you create the space? So lots of richness here, lots to go back over. I'm going to have a fun time editing this. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Enjoyed it.
My guest today has been Katherine Crewe, a TEC-Canada Chair, who is also an executive coach and operates out of the greater Montreal area. You can reach Katherine online at kcrewe@tec-canada.com, and I'm putting that up on the screen here to learn more about her coaching services and her groups. With each podcast, I end with a quote for you to ponder, and today I have two. One already mentioned in our earlier work, and it comes from Horace. Adversity has the effect of eliciting talents which, in prosperous circumstances, would have lain dormant. And from Carl Sagan, imagination will often carry us to worlds that never were, but without it, we go nowhere. So keep dreaming, keep thinking, keep struggling. I mentioned earlier, I haven't quite figured out all I need to learn in this crisis. It reminds me of Winston Churchill's never let a crisis go to waste. What should we be learning right now in this crisis that we don't want to exit before we've learned the lesson? That's one of my takeaways I've got to do. So until next time, be your best self. Seek to uplift others, be good, and do good. You have been listening to Severin Sorensen and the Arete Coach Podcast, where we explore excellence and the art and science of executive coaching today.